Hi everyone! Thank you for hanging out with me at MakerFest. I'm Jess, and today we are going to talk about cosplay. So we are going to be looking at three different areas. We have 3D printing, silicone mold making, and resin casting, as well as heat molding EVA foam. So we will get started. So let's start off by looking at 3D printing. So there are a bunch of different 3D print materials that you can use. The library uses ABS or PLA filaments. There are a lot of other materials that you can get filaments for, like wood or metal, you name it. There's probably a filament out there of it. So what's really cool about PLA is that it is made of cornstarch. So it is a more environmentally friendly material than some of the other filaments that you can get. It is pretty brittle though, so that's something to keep in mind if you are making a lot of props. What's cool about PLA though is that it can be heat molded with hot water. ABS is another filament that's used fairly often. It has a really cool property that it can actually be finished with acetone. So generally when you have a 3D printed object, you can see the lines in the object. So you can see where the printer went, which direction it took by these little divots in the print. And you can see that with the object that we're going to be printing or looking at, which is Shira's sword. So not ideal. But what's really cool about that is you can use acetone to get rid of these divots by doing a vapor bath or an acetone bath. And what that does is if you use 100% acetone, this is nail polish remover, but it is 100% acetone. You can actually do a vapor bath, so you will surround the object that you are trying to smooth out with acetone, usually through paper towels. That is definitely something that is a little bit challenging. So if you are looking to do that, definitely find a tutorial that goes over all of the steps, and you wear proper PPE when you're using this, because it can be a lot of fumes. You're dealing with a lot of fumes. So the acetone bath will essentially take a 3D object and it'll turn it into this beautiful, shiny little creature. So it melts the top layer of the 3D print and it fills in all of the gaps and gives it this shiny finish. So this is definitely useful if you are going to be finishing objects that you want the color that it is, and you are in a safe setting, that you can use an acetone bath for the ABS. Another really cool property of ABS is that it can be melted in acetone. You can use that to make ABS glue or ABS sludge. Again, you can look on YouTube for tutorials on this. Make sure that you are looking at a very thorough tutorial that talks about the safety as well, because you are going to be mixing acetone directly with ABS filament to melt it, so you can use it as a glue to stick pieces together. What we are going to do, though, is we are going to look at how you can fill 3D prints in order to sand and finish them. So these are two different components of Shira's sword that I printed off. You can find the files in the description box below. It is from Thingiverse. They're great files that go over the Netflix Shira props, which is what we are talking about today. So this is part of the sword. It comes in different parts. We are just going to look at these two little pieces today, and then we are going to look at the finished product. But we are not going to use acetone to finish this. We are actually going to use a automotive filler kit. So this one is a body repair kit. It comes in two components. This one is well loved, but it comes with the hardener, the cream hardener, as well as the material that you use to mix it all together. And then you will be spreading it on your 3D print job in nice thin layers. And what that's going to do is it's going to help build up the 3D print so then you can sand it smooth. Um, the issue with 3D printing is that the insides are very like honeycomb pattern. So when you are finishing it, if we were to sand this directly, all you're going to be doing is taking off the top layer and exposing the honeycomb pattern. You don't have a lot to work with, so we want to build it up to then sand it to a nice smooth finish. That way you maintain the integrity of the part. It's going to make it a little bit more durable, and it will make everything nice, smooth, and have a beautiful finish. So it does take time. We are going to be sanding. No one likes to sand things. So when we are applying this auto filler, when we're applying the repair kit or the body filler, we want to make sure that we are adding it in a very thin layer. We are only adding as much as we need to, so then we are not sanding for the rest of our lives, because that is the worst thing in the entire world. So you can see here in this 3D print that I had done earlier. So this pink part is the autofill, is the filler, and then you can actually paint directly on top of it. So this was a really rushed job, so it definitely is not painted as smooth as it could be. But what we've done is we've filled it, we've sanded it smooth, and then we have painted it, and then you can seal it if you would like to with a spray. I've just used like a high gloss spray to make the objects shiny and protect them a little bit more, but it is up to you how you would like to finish it. So this piece has been bondoed, it has been painted. So with the body filler, it's really important that you are wearing the proper PPE, that you are in a well ventilated area, that you are wearing gloves, and it does recommend a respirator. That is going to make it so I cannot tell you what I am doing. So we will probably move to a voiceover and just show you what the auto filler looks like, how we're going to apply it. But the instructions essentially, you take the body filler, you're going to put it in, it comes with a bowl, but you're probably going to want to use a cup or something, however much you're using it. And then you are going to be mixing, every kit is going to be different, so follow the instructions that you're given, but you usually mix a tiny bit of this for a glob of this. Mix it together, you should get a nice pink color, and then we are going to apply it to our 3D object in a thin layer, and it should be dry within an hour to be sanded. So we can sand it. Generally, when we are sanding objects, we want to start with a very low number and then move up to higher numbers. So that is going to go from a rough sandpaper to a fine sandpaper. Do that over time, you will get that nice smooth finish. And then I would move on to painting it as well. So with this, because we are not using acetone or acetone glue, if we want to secure two objects together, what we can do is use any other sort of glue. A lot of strong glues are beneficial. So like a plastic adhesive, Gorilla Glue, Loctite, that sort of thing. Super glue can work to create these objects or to ensure that they are going to be stuck together for a long time. And then what's nice, if we are using the body filler, we can fill in the gap that is going to be left by joining these two objects, and we can make sure that the structure is going to be stronger. So we are going to take a second, put on our PPE, mix the Bondo, and then we are just going to apply it in a thin layer so you can see what it should look like, let it dry, and we are going to show you what it will look like when you have done all those steps for a prop. So when our objects are finished, they are finished being filled, they are finished being sanding, they are ready to paint. This is just what a finished project could look like. This is the Shira sword. It is a little big to fit in the screen, but what we are going to do is add the gemstone to this little component here, and then our sword should be finished. So at the end of this video, we are going to put it all together and show you what your cosplay could look like. So we are going to use resin to make pieces for our cosplay. Resin, you can get resin that comes in two parts. This is kind of the more common resin, as like an art supply resin. It'll come with resin and then the hardener as well, which is pretty cool. You can also get resin that is UV resin, which we're going to demonstrate with today, because it's really quick, but it does need to be cured with a UV light. So what's neat about resin is that you can make custom gemstones, crystals, etc. So for this project, we're going to be using resin to make Shira's tiara crystal, as well as the crystal on her sword. So this is just the crystal on her sword, as well as her crystal that is on her tiara. So the 3D print file that I used for her sword had a gem file in it as well. And we printed this off. We could just use this if we wanted to, but we're going to make a mold of this so we can make it a little shiny and glittery and exciting. So to make a mold, you have a few options. You could purchase a mold kit like this one, which is a mold builder. It's a brush on latex kit that you can use. So you just put the object on a flat surface and brush many, many, many layers of latex, making sure that it dries in between. We are going to do a little bit of a DIY method this time, and we are going to mix together. We have water, dish soap in here, and then we are going to add 100% silicone into this mixture. What happens is the mixture acts as a catalyst for it to make it moldable. Not entirely sure. I do have a tutorial linked in the description box that goes into a little bit more detail, but it works. It's pretty cool. So that's what we're going to do today. So you are supposed to add 4 ounces of dish soap and 64 ounces of water. I have that, so 2 ounces of dish soap and 32 ounces of water. And then, yeah, this is going to make sure that the silicone can form a shape without sticking to your hands. But we are going to be wearing gloves because danger if you don't. Make sure that you are using proper PPE as well for this. So I've made sure that I am in a well ventilated space. I'm wearing gloves, and I'm going to be wearing a face shield as well, because that'll protect my eyeballs, which is what it recommends on the container. So we're going to be using a beautiful little silicone gun. This silicone is 100% silicone. It's clear silicone. It is what has worked in the past, and we're going to add enough for the mold, which is, I think, like 1.5 squeezes. So you can see it's kind of formed a weird little snaky weird little snake form in this bowl. And what we're going to do is we are going to smush it, knead it, roll it, and just kind of continue to play with it until it starts to get a little bit hard and difficult to move around. So this takes a few minutes. So that's just the fun part of this video. Okay, now that it is pretty solid, we are going to place it on a tray that we don't care about, just in case. And we are going to take our mold. So this is what we want to cast, and we are going to smush it into the silicone. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a lip. You want to make sure that the object can in fact come out. So if you're doing a round object, I did like a little skull earlier, just make sure that you are leaving enough area that you can wiggle your cast out. So right now we are going to let this sit for about an hour, and then it should be good to use. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to mix some UV resin because although we do have TV magic, we still need to let that chill for a little bit. So we're going to use a mold that I have purchased in the past, and we're going to use this little guy right here. So we're going to take our UV resin and we are going to use a mixture of pigments. So the resin that I have is clear, so it is going to give us a very clear crystal like finish, like this little friend, which is very useful for certain things, but for what I would like to do is have like a very red crystally sparkly business. So I'm using chalk pigment. So I have just taken a chalk pastel and I have scraped it to create this powder pigment. You can also use any sort of ink, so like alcohol ink. You can use like liquid acrylics, whatever will work with the resin that you're using. You can also purchase resin pigment as well, which is your safest bet, but we are going to be using the chalk pigment or the pastel chalk pigment. So we are going to fill our mold a little bit first, and then we're going to add the pigment, we're going to stir it up, add some more, stir it up again. So we're going to squeeze carefully into our mold, put the cap back on. This bottle is black just to protect it from any UV rays because that is what is going to cure it. And we are going to sprinkle some of our pigment in here. So I'm just taking like a wood dowel, something that you don't care about, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of a stir. And then add some more, and then we're going to stir again. So what will happen with the resin is if we're using like a 2-part resin, it's really important that when you are mixing it and then letting it set, so the 2-part resin, these guys will need to set for 24 hours. Whereas this one should be cured within 3-ish minutes using the UV light. The resin generally has air bubbles that will come to the surface. So you can use a torch to break those air bubbles, a heat gun to break those air bubbles, and it's going to be more important for these guys because they'll sit and the air bubbles will rise to the surface. Giving it a tap definitely helps the air bubbles rise to the surface as well. But we're not doing that today. We are just going to pop this in our little UV oven and we will be back with the finished result. Okay, so once it is cured, we can pop it out of the mold and we should be left with a beautiful little resin crystal or gem. This one is a little rough around the edges still, We can finish it off. If you are wanting to polish it, you can definitely do that. Sand it a little bit. Make sure that you are wearing the correct PPE when you're sanding it or polishing it. But I think it turned out well. Very shiny, very nice. And we are going to use that as like a little for the She-Ra cosplay. So now we are going to move on to EVA foam. Okay, so EVA foam is used a lot for props for cosplay. It can be cut to shape, which is amazing. You can glue it in layers to build stuff up. You can cut it with a knife. You can sand it into different shapes, or you can heat mold it and add details that way as well. So today we are going to make She-Ra's tiara out of EVA foam. So first we're going to look at the differences between the different widths of foam. So I have here this is like a 4mm sheet of EVA foam. You've probably seen stuff like this at craft stores. You can get sheets that are a little bit thinner than this. You can get sheets that are thicker than this. This is the size that we're using for this project, but the width is very much so dependent on what you would like to do with it. Another very common size or another very common width of EVA foam that you will find is the EVA foam sheets that you can get at most big box stores. So this EVA foam is usually in big squares, and it's used for flooring for like children's play areas, garages, that sort of thing. But it's like a squishy flooring type of foam. On one side, it'll be smooth. This is generally the side that's used for like plain armor, props, that sort of thing. And on the other side is the textured side. And this can be used to your advantage if you're using like a carbon fiber futuristic type of military armor. That can definitely be used as is to give texture to whatever you're creating. So if you are making a big thing with EVA foam, just make sure that you're remembering that it is very lightweight but very not breathable. So keep that in mind if you're making a big costume with a lot of EVA foam. So what's really cool about EVA foam is that it's very flexible. You can bend it into shape, heat mold it into shape, which is what we're going to be doing now. But when it comes to finishing it, that can be a bit of an issue because it's so flexible, paint can be a little tricky to adhere to it. It can crack, it can crease. So it's really important that you finish it. What we're going to use today for finishing our heat molded project is a Plasti Dip spray. But you can use Mod Podge, which is very affordable and pretty easy to access. And that will just keep it from cracking with the paint. I will show you what happens if you don't do that. So this is a project that I had done with EVA foam. It was a very last minute Halloween project, and it's not cute, but you can see that it wasn't finished properly. The paint is creasing and cracking and chipping off of the project. So if you're going through all the work of actually creating something, finishing it properly is going to save you a lot of headache. But when it comes to with the EVA foam, this was heat molded, so you can see that it's kind of still retaining its shape, even though it's been in a bag in the bottom of my closet for a long time. But it can have a lot of creasing if you're not taking care of it properly. So that's what happened with this one. It was very much smushed. It could be heat molded again to retain its original shape, but I think that this piece is good to be garbaged. Retired. So the project that we are going to be working on is a fancier tiara for She-Ra. This one is going to have some combs attached to it, so it can be attached to the side of your head. It's still pretty thin, it's still pretty flexible, but it's going to hold its shape a little bit more than this ultra thin one. So in the description box below, you will find the pattern that I used, which was from a YouTube video, which is an amazing video, and you should definitely check it out. But the pattern that I used, printed it off and cut out the pieces of EVA foam. So that is what we have here. We have cut out and just kind of sanded a little bit the tiara strip, and then we have the two headpieces as well. So the instructions had stated that you can keep the pattern that it had come with to add these little details. So what we are going to do right now is we can just trace out some of the details that we would like. And what's nice about EVA foam is that you can add details by scoring different components. If you want to weather it, if you want to age it, if you want to add some detail, you can score it and then heat it with a heat gun. And what will happen is you will get these little marks like this. So they're kind of built into the foam. And to do that, you need to be very careful with an X-Acto knife, but we are just going to lightly score, so we're not going to go all the way through the EVA foam because that would cut through it, and we are just going to run our knife across the lines that we would like to have that detail. Now, to shape this or add that detail, we are going to use a heat gun. So this is my heat gun. It has two settings. I use it on the lowest setting. The highest setting can be very intense. It's really important that you are being careful when you are using a heat gun, that you are using something that is going to be heat resistant. So I just put this lovely tray on my desk so I'm not going to burn my desk because the heat gun can get pretty toasty. And make sure that you are doing this in a well ventilated area. The EVA foam, when you're heating it, be very careful. You want to hold the heat gun a few inches away. Just do light motions back and forth. If you get too close to it, you are going to burn the foam. It's not going to be great. It's going to release a lot of not great chemicals, and it'll cause some bubbling and some burning, which you want to avoid as well. So make sure that you do have a high distance between the foam and your heat gun, that you're not too close, you're not burning it, and you're going to be moving it often. So for a little extra something, I just put down my little silicone mat, which will help mitigate some of the heat as well. And I'm going to start with this piece. So this piece I have previously scored. We are going to heat it on a low setting, and then you should see the lines get more apparent and have more depth as the foam kind of expands away from itself. And then we are going to actually continue this with the heat. We're going to mold it around an object. So we're going to use this lovely container just to mold it as it cools, so then it'll retain that shape. And once it is nice and warm, it's very, very flexible. We are going to just wrap it around this object to give it a bit of a curve, and we will hold onto it until it cools. You can definitely see that the lines have become more detailed. You can see the depth in them, and when you finish it, when you paint it, that will definitely pick it up, and the paint will give it more depth. So we went from a very flat shape to a nice curve that should hold its shape until it gets that hot again. So the next piece that we're going to do is the tiara. So same thing, we are going to be careful when we're using the heat gun. We're going to hold it a distance away, continuously move it, and then we are going to heat shape it around our object again. Once that is done, we are going to just wrap it around this object. If you find that it is not hot enough, you can definitely rewarm it, reshape it, and you can make pretty cool shapes. A lot of wave patterns you can make with this. I've shaped things around bowls to get like shoulder pads, which has been really cool. So a lot of really good applications of using heat molding for cosplay armor, props, etc. So this bad boy has been shaped, and because it's so flexible, we can move it to adjust it to our forehead, but it should hold this lovely shape here. So we have gone from this rolled up lovely shape to being able to create custom detail in the EVA foam, shape it to the object that we want to mold it after. And what we would do with this now is we would seal it with Plasti Dip or Mod Podge or whatever sealer we're going to be using. And then you can paint it with whatever paint. A lot of spray paints work really well because it'll again help be that flexible finish that you want. And when it is all dry, I have just added these combs to it so I can wear it and be She-Ra. So the next thing that we are going to do is put all of this together and show you what your finished cosplay could look like. Okay, and here is the finished sword. So we did a resin for this guy. He's not secured fully, so it's doing the trick for now. Last coat of paint, and that is what it will look like when it is bondoed, sanded, painted, finished with the resin crystal, and I will show you the tiara as well. So this is the tiara with our resin crystal as well as our sword. So we're going for a She-Ra if she was in her 30s, worked at the Pickering Public Library, dyed her hair pink, and married Catra. And that is our final look. And thank you so much for coming to our online Maker Fest.